Every single day, millions of people type a complex question into a search engine, and then, they just immediately drown in this chaotic avalanche of sponsored links, SEO-optimized garbage, and half-baked opinions.
Oh yeah, it's a total mess out there.
It really is. Like, we are supposedly living in the information age, yet finding actual reliable truth feels harder than ever. But hidden in plain sight is this highly structured, centuries-old code. It's a secret language used by researchers that cuts through all this modern noise like a scalpel.
Right, and it's something anyone can learn.
Exactly. So today, we are hacking the information ocean. We're diving into a comprehensive guide on how the world's top experts read, review, and synthesize academic literature. So what does this all mean for the average person who doesn't, spend their days in a laboratory or a university library?
Well, honestly, it means acquiring a devastatingly effective filter for reality. Because every legitimate research project, every empirical study, it isn't just an isolated document. It's a single utterance in this extended, centuries-old conversation between thinkers.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, and whether you are prepping for a high-stakes corporate strategy meeting or writing a policy brief or, simply trying to navigate your daily news feed without being manipulated, understanding how to filter and synthesize raw evidence is a superpower.
It's the fundamental difference between just passively inheriting your worldview and actively constructing it.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of doing that, because the source material outlines a very specific trajectory, and it doesn't start with reading, it starts with hunting.
Yes, the search strategy.
Right, and the text uses this really helpful analogy of a grocery store. If you need apples, you don't walk through the front doors of a supermarket and systematically pace up and down the cereal aisle and the cleaning supplies and frozen foods until you just stumble upon the fruit.
You'd be there all day.
Right, you navigate strategically straight to the produce section. But here's my immediate pushback on the text. The guide heavily pushes the use of Boolean operators, using words like AND or R, not in your searches.
Ah, yes, the classic Boolean logic.
Frankly, that sounds like a relic from a 1990s library catalog. In the age of AI and semantic search engines that can practically read our minds, why are we manually forcing a database to draw Venn diagrams?
I totally get why it feels outdated, but here's the thing. An AI search engine is essentially a people pleaser.
Huh. A people pleaser. What do you mean by that?
Well, the algorithms governing standard web searches are designed to predict what will keep you engaged. They're heavily influenced by popularity, your past behavior, paid placement. They guess your intent.
So they show you what they think you want to see, not necessarily the raw truth.
Exactly. But academic databases, like Citing for behavioral science or ERIC for education, they are completely agnostic. They don't care what you want to hear. They demand precision.
Right, they aren't trying to sell you anything.
And that is why Boolean logic is superior when you need rigor rather than popularity. You aren't asking the machine to guess. You are issuing strict mathematical commands.
You're dictating the exact boundaries of the sandbox you want to play in.
Precisely.
Let's look at the specific case from the textbook to make this concrete for everyone. Say you're researching adaptive testing, a specific educational methodology, but your focus is exclusively on early childhood education.
Okay, so you want zero contamination from studies looking at university students.
Right. If you just type adaptive testing college into a standard search bar, the algorithm assumes you are interested in all those topics and just throws thousands of university-level papers at you.
Which is the exact opposite of what you actually need.
Yeah.
So instead, you bypass the algorithm's guesswork and use Boolean logic. You query adaptive AND testing, not college.
Okay, let's break that down.
Conceptually, you are layering strict filters. The AND command requires that both words appear in the document. So you're finding only the overlapping center of that Venn diagram.
Which immediately slices away any paper that only mentions testing in a generic sense.
Exactly. Then you deploy the not command. By appending not college, you take a giant eraser to the results. You're telling the database to completely annihilate any article that contains the word college, even if it heavily discusses adaptive testing.
Wow. So you are carving out an incredibly specific slice of the literature.
Yes. It prevents the algorithm from doing that annoying thing where it says, we didn't find exactly what you wanted, but here's some popular things that are kind of close.
Oh, I hate that.
Right. You force it to be precise. If we connect this to the bigger picture, searching the literature isn't a passive act of receiving information. It is a highly aggressive, logical process of filtering noise.
You are isolating the exact conversation you intend to join.
which ensures that when you finally sit down to read, every single document in your stack is highly relevant.
Okay, so assuming we've used our Boolean scalpel perfectly, we've bypassed the junk, and we have a curated stack of, say, 5 incredibly dense, peer-reviewed articles.
The fun part.
Well, the sheer intimidation factor here is real. The jargon is heavy, the paragraphs are dense, and they all follow that predictable structure, right? Title, abstract, introduction, lit review, methods, results, discussion, references.
It's a very rigid format.
It is, but the text reveals a massive strategic hack for this. You absolutely do not read an academic paper from top to bottom.
No, never.
But honestly, skipping around feels inherently wrong. I mean, it feels like cheating, or at least like a really good way to miss crucial context.
It feels counterintuitive because, well, we are conditioned to read novels where the narrative builds sequentially to a climax.
Right, you don't read the last chapter of a mystery novel first.
Exactly. But a research paper is not a narrative journey. It is an architectural structure. The sections are load-bearing pillars. If you read sequentially, you will expend enormous cognitive energy slogging through the technical minutiae of the methodology before you even know if the study discovered anything useful.
It's an illusion of rigor.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the hack is essentially triage. You look at the title and abstract to ensure it's in the right universe, and then you skip the entire middle of the paper.
You just jump straight to the discussion and results sections.
Yes, you read the ending first to see what they actually found. Only if the destination, the findings, actually impacts your specific question do you backtrack to the introduction and methods to scrutinize how they arrived at those findings.
You evaluate the worth of the discovery before you spend an hour auditing the map they used to get there. That makes so much sense. But here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Oh.
The way you evaluate that map depends entirely on the fundamental nature of the research. The text draws a hard philosophical line between two distinct worlds: quantitative research and qualitative research.
Yes, the great divide.
And they are completely different animals.
They really represent two distinct epistemologies, two completely different ways of believing we can discover the truth. Quantitative research is obsessed with variables, control, and measurement.
It's all about the numbers.
Right. It seeks to test a pre-existing hypothesis by reducing reality to data points.
And when you skip to the results section of a quantitative paper, you are hunting for a very specific threshold. The text highlights the p-value, specifically looking for p less than 0.05.
The holy grail of statistical significance.
Basically, the magic number.
Yeah, in the simplest terms, the p-value measures the probability that the effect you are seeing is just a random fluke of the universe.
So a p-value of less than 0.05 indicates that there is less than a 5% probability that the results occurred by random chance.
Exactly. It is the mathematical mechanism researchers use to confidently state the relationship we observe between these two variables is highly likely to be real.
So the quantitative folks are looking for mathematical certainty, but then you have the qualitative researchers who seem to view that reduction to numbers as missing the entire point of the human experience.
Right, you won't find a p-value in a qualitative study.
You find narrative.
Because qualitative research isn't about counting phenomena. It's about interpreting lived experience. It relies on ethnographies, deep dive interviews, open-ended observation.
Stuff you can't easily put into a pie chart.
Exactly. Furthermore, it is often fundamentally inductive.
Okay, unpack inductive for us.
Rather than starting with a rigid theory and testing it with data, like the quantitative folks do, qualitative researchers immerse themselves in the data to build a theory from the ground up.
And the text points to grounded theory as the prime example of this. The theory literally doesn't exist until the researcher extracts it from the patterns of human behavior they observe.
Right.
It's the friction between these two approaches that I find so fascinating. The quantitative data tells you how many people did a thing, but the qualitative data tells you what it felt like to do it.
Which is why a sophisticated researcher doesn't choose sides. They recognize that evaluating a p-value requires auditing statistical rigor, while evaluating grounded theory requires auditing narrative authenticity. Both are necessary to see the full picture.
Okay, so reading the end of the paper first saves us time, and understanding the quant-qual divide helps us evaluate the truth. But breaking down, say, 20 papers this way creates a completely new problem: fragmentation.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when you deconstruct that many studies, isolating variables and extracting conclusions, You don't have a coherent understanding anymore. You just have a massive pile of disjointed puzzle pieces on the floor. How do we force those pieces back into a cohesive shape?
Well, you have to externalize your cognition.
Externalize your cognition.
Yeah, you cannot hold that level of granular conflicting data in your working memory. The source text advocates for a tool that sounds deceptively mundane but is structurally profound. The literature spreadsheet, often called a synthesis matrix.
I have to admit, when the text said make a spreadsheet, my eyes totally glazed over for a second.
It sounds like basic administrative work.
Right. You make columns for author, year, methods, and findings. But when you actually look at the case study they provide regarding pet ownership, the power of this matrix becomes obvious. It isn't just about organizing notes, it's about forced juxtaposition.
That is the perfect term for it. Forced juxtaposition. The matrix forces isolated studies into a direct dialogue with each other.
Yeah, look at the pet ownership example. On one row, you log a study by Barcelos and colleagues. They used qualitative focus groups and found that dog walking activities deeply enhanced personal well-being and social connections.
So that's your qualitative narrative.
Right. It's a great insight into the lived experience of having a dog. But right below it in the spreadsheet, you log a study by Chowdhury. Now, this is a massive quantitative endeavor tracking over 4,000 individuals.
And the hard metric jumps out. Pet ownership is associated with a 26% reduction in cardiovascular death.
26%.
Right. And by locking these two disparate findings into adjacent rows, the matrix creates a three-dimensional view of the phenomenon that your brain likely wouldn't synthesize on its own.
You immediately see that the qualitative well-being observed by Barcelos might be the exact mechanism driving the quantitative cardiovascular survival measured by Chowdhury.
Exactly. The spreadsheet does the heavy lifting of pattern recognition.
Which brings us to the ultimate goal of all this effort. What is the actual difference between taking that spreadsheet and just writing a summary of it versus doing what the text calls a true synthesis?
A summary is basically taking an inventory of a warehouse. You walk down the aisle and list what you see. Article A said this, Article B argued that, Article C found this other thing.
It's like a high school book report.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is sequential, passive reporting.
Mm.
It requires almost no critical thought and generates zero new insight. Synthesis, on the other hand, is taking the disparate parts from that warehouse and building a functional engine out of them.
So you group by theme rather than by author.
Yes.
The text provides a stellar example of this regarding research into maternal depression and children's health.
Right. In a summary, you would dedicate a paragraph to a study about asthma, and then you'd transition to a totally separate paragraph about a study on hospital admissions.
Just a list of facts.
But a synthesized paragraph subordinates the individual studies to a larger unifying theme. It constructs an argument that maternal depression creates a broad spectrum of severe health vulnerabilities for children.
And it proves that argument by rapidly weaving the evidence together. Like, a single synthesized sentence might point out that maternal depression correlates with higher asthma rates, citing one study, while simultaneously linking it to increased emergency room visits, citing a completely different paper, and finishing by noting a drop in regular pediatric checkups, citing a third.
What's fascinating here is that the researcher doing the synthesis has essentially created a new reality that didn't exist in any of the individual papers.
Oh, wow, that's true.
None of those three authors wrote a paper about the complete spectrum of vulnerability. They only wrote about their specific metric. By connecting the dots, you reveal the shadow on the wall that those multiple light sources cast.
You transform from a passive reporter of facts into an active architect of new understanding.
Exactly.
It is incredibly satisfying when you finally see those connections snap together. You've generated a brilliant new insight. But before you can publish it or take it to your boss or share it with the world, you collide with the final non-negotiable protocol of the academic world: citation.
The dreaded citation.
Honestly, this is where most people check out. It feels like bureaucratic red tape, right? A labyrinth of commas, italics, and arbitrary formatting rules just designed to torture undergraduates.
Well, viewed purely through the lens of formatting, it is tedious, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But conceptually, citation is the bedrock of intellectual integrity.
On the surface, yes, it prevents plagiarism.
Right. Taking someone's unique conceptual framework or data and passing it off as your own is intellectual theft, which is a fatal offense in a community where ideas are the only currency.
But dodging a plagiarism accusation is just the baseline. The real purpose seems much deeper than just staying out of trouble.
It is. It is about mapping the intellectual family tree of your argument. Citation accomplishes two crucial objectives. First, it establishes the legitimacy of your own voice.
By showing your work.
Exactly. By explicitly showing how you have wrestled with the established heavyweights in a given field, you demonstrate to the reader that your synthesized conclusions are built on a bedrock of rigorous evidence, not mere speculation. You prove you've earned the right to speak.
And the second objective is about the reader's journey.
Yes, it creates a reproducible map. If a reader is captivated by your synthesis of how maternal depression impacts childhood asthma, your citations provide the exact coordinates required for them to bypass your interpretation and evaluate the raw source material for themselves.
And the text explains that this mapping system always operates in two interlocking parts. First, you have the shorthand, the in-text citation. It's a brief interruption in the flow of the argument, usually just an author's last name and a publication year in parentheses.
Right, it's a quick nod to say, the specific data point I just used belongs to this person.
And that shorthand points directly to the second part, which is the comprehensive map at the end of the document, the bibliography.
Yes, and this is where the specific style guides like APA for the social sciences, MLA for the humanities, or the Chicago Manual of Style come into play. They dictate exactly how to list the journal title, volume, issue, page numbers, and digital object identifiers.
Which guarantees that a researcher in Tokyo and a student in Toronto can use your paper to track down the exact same source document you used, regardless of the database they are searching.
This raises an important question, though. If we strip away the tedious formatting rules, what is a citation at its core? How can we trust any claim in science and policy or in the news if we cannot independently verify the evidence that supposedly supports it? Citation isn't just a formatting rule. It is the fundamental mechanism of trust in human knowledge. Without it, everything degrades into unsubstantiated rumor.
The fundamental mechanism of trust. I love that. That perfectly encapsulates the entire journey we've dissected today. We started by exploring how Boolean operators, A and D, or not, allow us to bypass algorithmic guesswork and enforce strict logical boundaries on our searches.
We learned to abandon the instinct to read a paper like a novel, instead hacking the architecture by jumping to the results to evaluate the p-values and grounded theory first.
We examine how a synthesis matrix forces disparate qualitative and quantitative findings into a dialogue, allowing us to elevate our thinking from a mere inventory of facts to the construction of a new thematic understanding.
And finally, we decoded the necessity of citation, not as a bureaucratic punishment, but as the creation of a verifiable map that honors the ongoing conversation of research.
It's an arsenal of critical thinking strategies. And I want to leave you in the final thought to mull over. We've discussed these skills in the context of academic literature, but think about how desperately this exact framework is needed outside the ivory tower.
Oh, the modern information ecosystem is practically designed to bypass critical thought.
Precisely. We are constantly bombarded by sensational clickbait, algorithmically generated outrage, and influencers making wild claims based on, quote-unquote, hidden studies.
Right.
What if we started applying this level of methodological scrutiny to our daily feeds? The next time a headline screams about a miracle cure or a terrifying new social trend, don't just absorb it. Triage the article. Skip the emotional introduction and look for the methodology.
Do they actually measure something real, or is the sample size like 3 people?
Exactly. Ask yourself, where is the synthesis matrix here? Are they showing all the evidence or just cherry-picking what fits their narrative? Demand the citations from the voices you listen to. You do not need to be writing a peer-reviewed dissertation to leverage these tools. You just need to be a person who refuses to let algorithms and loud voices dictate what is true.
The exact same skills used to deconstruct a scientific paper are your ultimate defense against the noise of the modern world. You have the insider secrets now. Go build your filter. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.